The clock on the wall of room 203 ticked slowly as the afternoon sun streamed through the blinds. It was Friday, the last class of the day, and most of the students at Westlake Middle School were already dreaming of weekend plans. But in Mr. Peterson's advanced mathematics class, the mood was focused, if a bit drowsy. Amir Khan sat quietly in the back row, his dark hair falling over his eyes as he hunched over his notebook. He was 12 years old, small for his age, with quick brown eyes that noticed everything but rarely made contact with others. His desk was perfectly organized, pencils lined up, calculator positioned just so, notebook open to a fresh page. Though he knew every answer to the warm-up problems on the board, Amir hadn't raised his hand once. He never did. It wasn't that he didn't want to participate. He simply couldn't bear the feeling of all those eyes turning toward him, the pressure of being seen. So he stayed quiet, wrote down his answers, and kept his brilliance to himself. "All right, everyone," Mr. Peterson said, clapping his hands together as he stood up from his desk. He was a tall man with salt and pepper hair and glasses that constantly slipped down his nose. "I hope you're all awake because we're going to try something different today." The class stirred. Different usually meant interesting, but it could also mean difficult. Amir looked up from his notebook, curious despite himself. "Before we end for the weekend, I want to show you something from outside our normal curriculum." Mr. Peterson picked up a piece of chalk. He was old school that way, preferring the chalkboard to the whiteboard on the other wall, and turned to the board. He began to write, and as his hand moved across the board, the usual classroom murmurs died away. What appeared wasn't the type of equation they'd been working on all week. It wasn't even close. Symbols, variables, and complex notations spread across the green surface, and by the time Mr. Peterson put down the chalk, the board was filled with what looked like a graduate-level differential equation. Amir's heartbeat quickened. He recognized elements of the problem. It dealt with rates of change and involved multiple variables, but it was far beyond anything their class had covered. It was beautiful, really. Like a complicated puzzle waiting to be solved. "What is that?" whispered Lily Chen from the desk next to Amir. She was the best math student in their class, or at least that's what everyone thought. No one knew that Amir consistently scored higher on tests, but asked Mr. Peterson not to announce his grades. Mr. Peterson turned back to face the class, his eyes scanning the room. The look on the students' faces ranged from confusion to outright panic. Tyler Rodriguez, who sat in the front row, was shaking his head slightly. Priya Patel was frantically flipping through her textbook, as if the answer might be hidden somewhere in its pages. "This," Mr. Peterson said, gesturing toward the board, "is a differential equation that describes a real-world problem. It might look intimidating, but I want you all to take a moment to just observe it. Don't worry about solving it, just look at it. See if any parts of it seem familiar." The room fell into an uncomfortable silence. 24 pairs of eyes stared at the board, but no hands went up. No one spoke. Even Lily, who normally jumped at any challenge, looked lost. Amir, however, couldn't look away from the equation. His mind was already breaking it down, identifying the components, seeing connections. It reminded him of a problem he'd worked on at home last month, from one of the advanced math books his uncle had given him for his birthday. "Sir," called out Tyler from the front, "is this a joke? We haven't learned anything like this." A few nervous laughs rippled through the classroom. Mr. Peterson smiled, but his eyes continued to scan the room as if he was looking for something or someone. "It's not a joke. Tyler, this equation appears on a recent mathematics competition paper. I'm not expecting anyone to solve it today. I just wanted to give you all a glimpse of where mathematics can take you if you continue to study it." Amir's fingers twitched. He knew he could at least start to solve it. The approach was clear to him. Separate the variables, identify the boundary conditions, work through step by step. But the thought of walking up to that board, of standing there with everyone watching him, his stomach clenched. "I'll give you all 5 minutes," Mr. Peterson continued. "Just see if you can identify any elements of the equation, any terms or operations that look familiar. Think of it as a preview of your mathematical future." The tension in the room eased a bit. This wasn't a test. It was just an observation exercise. Students began to whisper to each other, pointing at parts of the equation, making guesses. But Amir stayed silent, his mind racing ahead, solving the problem almost on its own. His pencil moved across his notebook paper, Not because he was trying to solve it, but because he couldn't help himself. Math had always been like this for him, not work, but a kind of play, a natural extension of how his mind worked. My dad's an engineer, and even he would struggle with this, Lily whispered to Amir, leaning over slightly. She rarely spoke to him, and Amir was so startled that he accidentally drew a line across his work. He nodded without looking up, hoping she'd turn away. Near the front of the class, Priya raised her hand. Mr. Peterson, I think I recognize the derivative notation, but everything else. It's like reading another language. Mr. Peterson nodded encouragingly. Good observation, Priya. Anyone else notice anything familiar? A few more hands went up and students pointed out basic elements they recognized. A partial derivative here, an integral there. But no one even came close to addressing the actual problem. Meanwhile, Amir had already filled half a page with calculations. The solution was taking shape in his mind, clear as day. His heart pounded as he realized he was close to figuring it out completely. In that moment, Mr. Peterson's eyes landed on Amir, and something changed in the teacher's expression. He'd noticed the frantic writing, the complete absorption. He started walking toward the back of the classroom. Amir felt the approach rather than saw it and hastily covered his work with his arm. But he wasn't quick enough. Amir, Mr. Peterson said quietly, now standing beside his desk. May I see what you're working on? The class fell silent again. All eyes turned toward the back. Amir felt his face grow hot, his palms begin to sweat. He couldn't speak, could barely breathe. Slowly, reluctantly, he moved his arm. Mr. Peterson picked up the notebook, his eyes widening slightly as he scanned Amir's work. For what felt like an eternity, he said nothing. Then he looked at Amir with an expression the boy couldn't quite read. Surprise, yes, but something else too. Pride, maybe? Amir has been working on a solution, Mr. Peterson announced to the class, his voice careful, measured. Would you be willing to share your approach with us? The question hung in the air. Amir's immediate instinct was to say no, to shrink back, to become invisible again. But there was something in Mr. Peterson's eyes, a kind of quiet confidence, as if he knew something about Amir that even Amir didn't know about himself. Lily was staring at him now, her expression puzzled. Tyler had turned all the way around in his seat. Priya's mouth was slightly open in surprise, and in that moment something shifted inside Amir. A tiny door opened, one that had always been closed before. What if he did go to the board? What if he did show them what he could do? The thought was terrifying, exhilarating. Mr. Peterson was still waiting, the notebook still in his hands, and Amir found himself standing. Though he had no memory of making the decision to do so, his legs felt shaky, his hands cold. The walk to the front of the classroom seemed to take forever, each step an effort against the weight of his own fear. The chalk felt strange in his fingers as Mr. Peterson handed it to him. The board loomed large before him, the complex equation stretching across it like a challenge, a dare. Amir took a deep breath, and then he began to write. The classroom faded away. The stares, the whispers, even Mr. Peterson, all of it disappeared. There was only Amir and the problem, dancing together in a world of numbers and symbols. His hand moved with growing confidence, filling the empty space below the original equation with his work. He was vaguely aware of gasps behind him, of Mr. Peterson's quiet, incredible, under his breath. But none of it mattered. For the first time in his life, Amir Khan wasn't hiding. He was showing his true self, right there on the board for everyone to see, and it felt like flying. The story of how Amir became a math prodigy began long before that fateful day in Mr. Peterson's classroom. It started when he was just a small boy, barely 4 years old. Sitting at the kitchen table of his family's modest apartment, his mother, Nadia, was preparing dinner while his father, Hassan, was going through bills at the table. Hassan, an electrical engineer who had immigrated to America 5 years before Amir was born, was using a calculator to add up the monthly expenses. Little Amir, coloring nearby, looked up and said quietly, 487. His parents glanced at each other, confused. What was that, Beta? His mother asked. The bills, Amir said, pointing to the scattered papers. They add up to $487. Hassan punched the numbers into his calculator again, his eyebrows rising in surprise when the display showed 487.3. He looked at his young son with newfound wonder. How did you know that? Amir shrugged, already back to his coloring book. I just saw the numbers and added them. That night, after Amir had gone to bed, Nadia and Hassan sat at the same kitchen table, speaking in hushed, excited tones. Their son had added a column of 8 numbers, some with decimals, faster than an adult with a calculator. It wasn't normal. It was extraordinary. My brother was like this, Hassan said, remembering his own childhood in Lahore. He could multiply 3-digit numbers in his head. The teachers didn't know what to do with him. What happened to him? Nadia asked, already knowing the answer wouldn't be happy. Hassan's brother had ended up working at a cell phone repair shop, his gift for mathematics wasted. Hassan's face grew determined. We won't let that happen to Amir. We'll nurture this gift, and so they did. They bought him puzzle books and math games. They took him to libraries and science museums. They watched in amazement as their son devoured knowledge like other children devoured candy. By the time Amir was 8, he had worked his way through elementary school math and was starting on algebra. By 10, he was tackling calculus concepts. His bedroom shelves, once filled with toys, now overflowed with math textbooks, some borrowed from libraries, others gifts from relatives who had noticed his unusual abilities. But as Amir's mathematical skills grew, so did his awareness that he was different from other children. At school, he quickly learned that solving problems too quickly or knowing answers before the teacher finished explaining made others uncomfortable. Some kids called him calculator or robot. Others simply avoided him. So Amir developed 2 selves, the math enthusiast who flourished at home and the quiet average student he pretended to be at school. He deliberately made small mistakes on tests to avoid perfect scores. He bit his tongue when he knew the answer to a difficult question. He became, in essence, invisible. His parents noticed the change but didn't know how to address it. Why don't you join the math club? His mother suggested one evening as she helped him with dinner. Amir shook his head, carefully cutting carrots into perfectly equal pieces. I don't want to, he said simply. But you love math, his father said, looking up from his newspaper. At home, Amir clarified. I love math at home. His parents exchanged worried glances but didn't push. They understood something about being different, about navigating a world where standing out could be dangerous, so they created a sanctuary at home where Amir could be himself, hoping that someday he would find the courage to share his gift with the world. On weekends, Hassan would bring home advanced math problems from his engineering colleagues. They would sit at the kitchen table, father and son, working through equations that most college students would find challenging. These were Amir's happiest moments, the numbers dancing in his head, his father's proud smile when he found a solution, the feeling that his mind was doing exactly what it was meant to do. On his 12th birthday, Amir's Uncle Farid visited from New York. Uncle Farid, Hassan's younger brother, was a professor of mathematics at Columbia University. He brought Amir a stack of books on advanced topics, differential equations, number theory, abstract algebra. These might be a bit challenging, Uncle Farid said with a wink. But I have a feeling you're up for it. That night, long after his birthday cake had been eaten and his parents had gone to bed, Amir sat cross-legged on his bedroom floor, devouring one of the books. The concepts were indeed challenging, but that only made the thrill greater when he understood them. It was like discovering a new room in a house he thought he knew well. Over the next few months, Amir worked his way through Uncle Farid's books. Sometimes he would call his uncle with questions, and they would talk for hours, their conversation drifting from mathematics to physics to philosophy. These calls were lifelines for Amir, proof that somewhere in the world there were people who thought like him, who found beauty in numbers and patterns. When he started 7th grade at Westlake Middle School, Amir was placed in Mr. Peterson's advanced mathematics class. Mr. Peterson was known as a demanding teacher who pushed his students hard. Most kids dreaded his class, but Amir was secretly excited. Perhaps here, finally, he would be challenged, but the advanced curriculum was still far below Amir's abilities. They were studying pre-algebra concepts that he had mastered years ago. Once again, he found himself holding back, pretending to struggle with problems he could solve in seconds, carefully maintaining his disguise as an ordinary student. Mr. Peterson, however, was more observant than Amir's previous teachers. He noticed how the boy's eyes would light up when a new concept was introduced, only to dim again when the examples turned out to be simple. He saw how Amir would sometimes start to raise his hand, then lower it again, retreating into silence. He observed the careful mistakes on Amir's tests, always small, always just enough to avoid a perfect score. One day, about 2 months into the school year, Mr. Peterson asked Amir to stay after class. Amir's stomach tightened with anxiety. Had he not been careful enough? Had his mask slipped? "Amir," Mr. Peterson said once the other students had left, "I'd like to ask you something, and I hope you'll give me an honest answer." Amir nodded, his eyes fixed on the floor. "Are you finding this class too easy?" The question was so unexpected that Amir looked up in surprise, meeting his teacher's gaze directly for perhaps the first time. Mr. Peterson's expression held no judgment, just genuine curiosity. Amir hesitated, then gave a tiny nod. Mr. Peterson smiled. "I thought so. Would you be interested in some extra challenges? Nothing you have to share with the class. Just between you and me." Again, Amir nodded, a small spark of hope igniting within him. The next day, Mr. Peterson gave Amir a folder with a set of problems that were genuinely difficult, university-level challenges that required creative thinking and deep understanding. For the first time at school, Amir felt his mind stretching, reaching. This became their routine. Every week, Mr. Peterson would provide a new set of problems, and Amir would return the previous set with elegant, insightful solutions. They never discussed it in class, and Amir continued his careful performance of averageness for his classmates. But in those weekly exchanges, a trust was building. One evening in late autumn, Amir's parents were called to the school for a conference with Mr. Peterson. They arrived nervous, unsure what to expect. "Mr. and Mrs. Khan," Mr. Peterson began once they were seated in his classroom, "I've asked to meet with you because your son has an extraordinary gift for mathematics." He then showed them some of Amir's work on the advanced problems, explaining the sophistication of his solutions, the creativity of his approaches. "In 20 years of teaching," he said, "I've never seen a student with this level of natural ability." Nadia's eyes filled with tears of pride. Hassan sat straighter in his chair, his face solemn but his eyes gleaming. "We know," Hassan said simply. "We've known since he was very small." "Then you understand that Amir needs more than what our standard curriculum can offer," Mr. Peterson said. "Even the advanced track isn't challenging him. They discussed options, special programs, online courses, mentorships. But when Mr. Peterson suggested that Amir should participate in mathematics competitions, both parents shook their heads. "Amir doesn't like attention," Nadia explained. "He hides his abilities at school." Mr. Peterson nodded thoughtfully. "I've noticed. But talent like his, it's like trying to hide the sun behind your hand. Eventually the light finds its way out." As the meeting concluded, Mr. Peterson made a suggestion that would ultimately change everything. "I have an idea," he said, "a way to help Amir see that his gift isn't something to hide. But I'll need your permission." He outlined his plan, simple but potentially powerful. Hassan and Nadia listened intently, their expressions moving from doubt to hope. Finally, they agreed. That night at dinner, Amir noticed his parents exchanging mysterious glances but thought little of it. His mind was occupied with a particularly beautiful problem from Mr. Peterson's latest set, a challenge involving optimization that had kept him awake the previous night until he'd cracked it. Little did he know that in just a few days, his carefully constructed world of mathematical secrecy would be turned upside down, that the light Mr. Peterson had spoken of would indeed find its way out, and that his life would never be the same again. The morning of that fateful Friday began like any other for Amir. He woke up at exactly 6:30 a.m., the same time he woke up every day without needing an alarm clock. His body seemed to have an internal clock as precise as his mathematical mind. He went through his usual routine: shower, brush teeth, comb his unruly dark hair that never seemed to lie flat no matter how much water he put on it. He carefully packed his backpack, double-checking that he had everything he needed: textbooks, notebooks, pencil case, lunch, water bottle. Amir found comfort and order in knowing exactly where everything was. At breakfast, his mother placed a plate of eggs and toast in front of him along with a glass of orange juice. "Big day today?" she asked casually. Too casually, Amir looked up, confused. "No, Just regular Friday. His father lowered his newspaper slightly, exchanging a quick glance with his wife. Well, every day is an opportunity for something special to happen, he said with an odd smile. Amir frowned. His parents were acting strange, but he had no time to figure out why. The bus would arrive in exactly 12 minutes, and it took him 8 minutes to walk to the bus stop, which left him with a 4-minute buffer, just how he liked it. The school day passed normally. In English, they discussed The Giver, a book Amir had read 3 times already because he loved how it depicted a world built on mathematical precision. In history, they continued their unit on ancient civilizations, learning about how the Egyptians had used mathematics to build the pyramids. In science, they did an experiment measuring the rate at which different materials conducted heat. Amir had already calculated the expected results in his head before they even began. By the time math class rolled around at the end of the day, Amir was feeling the familiar Friday tiredness. The weekend stretched before him. 2 days of freedom when he could immerse himself in his beloved math books without pretending to be someone he wasn't. He slid into his seat at the back of Mr. Peterson's classroom, took out his notebook and pencils and arranged them neatly on his desk. Lily Chen came in shortly after and took her usual seat next to him. She gave him a smile, which he returned with a quick nod. Lily was nice enough, but like everyone else, she had no idea who Amir really was. The class filled up quickly. Tyler Rodriguez and his friends were talking loudly about the basketball game scheduled for that evening. Priya Patel was showing off her new graphing calculator to a group of admiring girls. The usual Friday afternoon energy filled the room, a mixture of excitement for the weekend and the restlessness that came from sitting in classrooms all day. When Mr. Peterson walked in, the noise gradually died down. He had that effect on students, not because he was strict, but because they respected him. He was fair, he was smart, and he genuinely seemed to care whether they learned the material or not. "All right, everyone," Mr. Peterson said, clapping his hands together as he stood up from his desk. "I hope you're all awake because we're going to try something different today." Amir felt a little jolt of curiosity. Different could mean anything with Mr. Peterson. As the teacher turned to the board and began to write, Amir's heart began to race. The equation that appeared was no ordinary middle school math problem. It wasn't even high school level. It was a complex differential equation, specifically a partial differential equation with boundary conditions. Amir recognized it immediately. It was similar to a problem he had solved from one of Uncle Fareed's books just last week. This particular equation could model heat diffusion through a non-uniform material, something that connected to their science lesson earlier that day. Around him, the classroom had gone completely silent. No one was even whispering anymore. 24 pairs of eyes stared at the board in total confusion. "What is that?" Lily whispered beside him, her voice tinged with panic. Before Amir could respond, not that he would have, Tyler called out from the front row, "Sir, is this a joke?" "We haven't learned anything like this." Mr. Peterson smiled in that mysterious way he had, the smile that always made students think he knew something they didn't. Well, he did know more than they did. He was the teacher, after all. But this smile suggested something specific, something secret. "It's not a joke. Tyler, this equation appears on a recent mathematics competition paper. I'm not expecting anyone to solve it today. I just wanted to give you all a glimpse of where mathematics can take you if you continue to study it." Amir's fingers began to drum lightly on his desk. The solution pathway was already forming in his mind. Separate the variables, apply the boundary conditions, solve the resulting ordinary differential equation. It was challenging, yes, but not impossible. Not for him. "I'll give you all 5 minutes," Mr. Peterson continued. "Just see if you can identify any elements of the equation. Any terms or operations that look familiar. Think of it as a preview of your mathematical future." The tension in the classroom eased a bit as students realized they weren't expected to actually solve this monster of an equation. They began to point out familiar elements, derivatives, variables, constants, but Amir couldn't help himself. His hand moved almost of its own accord, his pencil flying across his notebook page as he worked through the solution step by step. It was like a dance his mind knew by heart, each move flowing naturally into the next. He was so absorbed in his work that he didn't notice Mr. Peterson moving through the classroom. Didn't realize the teacher was approaching his desk until a shadow fell across his notebook. Amir, Mr. Peterson said quietly, now standing beside his desk. May I see what you're working on? The classroom fell silent again. All eyes turned toward Amir. He felt his face grow hot with embarrassment. His instinct was to cover his work, to hide it as he always did. But something in Mr. Peterson's voice, a gentleness, an understanding, made him hesitate. Slowly, reluctantly, he moved his arm to reveal his work. Mr. Peterson picked up the notebook, his eyes scanning Amir's neat handwriting, the orderly progression of steps. For what seemed like an eternity to Amir, the teacher said nothing. Then he looked at Amir with an expression of such genuine admiration that the boy felt something shift inside him. Amir has been working on a solution, Mr. Peterson announced to the class. Would you be willing to share your approach with us? The question hung in the air. Amir's heart was pounding so hard he was sure everyone could hear it. His first instinct was to say no, to shake his head, to shrink back into his safe anonymity. But there was something about this moment that felt different, as if he was standing at a crossroads. He thought about all the times he'd hidden his true self, all the moments he'd dimmed his light to avoid standing out. He thought about the pure joy he felt when solving difficult problems, a joy he'd never been able to share with anyone except his parents and Uncle Fareed. And then, almost as if someone else was controlling his body, Amir found himself standing up. The walk to the front of the classroom was the longest journey of his young life. Each step felt heavy, his legs like lead. He could feel the stares of his classmates, could almost hear their thoughts. What was quiet Amir Khan doing? What could he possibly have to show them? Mr. Peterson handed him a piece of chalk, and for a moment Amir just held it, feeling its weight in his hand. The board loomed before him, the complex equation, a challenge he had already met in his notebook, but now had to conquer publicly. He took a deep breath and began to write. The first few marks were shaky, his hand trembling slightly. But as he continued, as the familiar rhythm of mathematical reasoning took over, his strokes became firmer, more confident. He separated the variables, showing his work clearly with each step. He applied the boundary conditions, demonstrating how they constrained the solution. As he worked, the classroom faded away. There was only the problem and the solution, dancing together like old friends. He was vaguely aware of Mr. Peterson standing nearby, of the absolute silence behind him. But these awareness were distant, unimportant. When he finally wrote down the solution, a neat, elegant expression that captured the behavior of the system completely, he stepped back, looking at his work with a critical eye. Yes, it was correct. He was sure of it. Only then did he turn around and the reality of what he had done crashed over him. 24 pairs of eyes were fixed on him, expressions ranging from confusion to disbelief to, was that admiration? That's correct, Mr. Peterson said, his voice carrying a note of wonder despite clearly having expected this outcome. Absolutely correct. Amir has just solved a differential equation that most college students would struggle with. The silence stretched for another moment, and then Tyler Rodriguez, the basketball star who had never spoken to Amir before, let out a low whistle of appreciation. Dude, he said, that was insane. And then, like a dam breaking, the classroom erupted in noise. Students were asking questions all at once, wanting to know how he did it, how long he'd been able to do math like this, whether he could help them with their homework. Lily Chen was staring at him with her mouth slightly open. You've been sitting next to me all year, she said, almost accusingly. Why didn't you ever say anything? Amir, overwhelmed by the attention, looked to Mr. Peterson for help. The teacher seemed to understand instantly. All right, everyone, give Amir some space, he said, raising his hands to quiet the class. What you've just witnessed is extraordinary, but remember, Amir is still the same classmate you've known all year. But that wasn't quite true, was it? Amir wasn't the same anymore. Standing at the front of the classroom, chalk dust on his fingers, the solution to an advanced mathematical problem written in his handwriting on the board behind him, he felt different. Lighter somehow, as if a weight he'd been carrying for years had suddenly been lifted. Amir, Mr. Peterson said, turning to him, would you like to explain your approach? How did you know how to solve this equation? Amir's first instinct was to shake his head, to retreat back to his seat to try to become invisible again. But the excitement on his classmates' faces, the genuine interest they were showing, it was new, it was terrifying, but it was also nice. He cleared his throat. Well, he began, his voice barely above a whisper. First, you have to recognize that it's a partial differential equation describing heat diffusion. As he explained, his voice grew stronger. The words came more easily than he had expected, the concepts flowing naturally as he pointed to different parts of his solution. He found himself making eye contact with his classmates, something he usually avoided at all costs. And they were listening. Really listening. No one was laughing or calling him calculator or robot. They were leaning forward in their seats, following his explanation as best they could, nodding when they understood, frowning in concentration when they didn't. When he finished his explanation, there was a moment of silence, and then the class broke into spontaneous applause. Actual applause. For him, Amir Khan, the boy who had spent his entire school life trying not to be noticed. The bell rang, signaling the end of the class and the school week, but no one moved. All eyes were still on Amir. That was amazing, man, Tyler said, standing up and slinging his backpack over his shoulder. Seriously, like Nobel Prize stuff. It's the Fields Medal for mathematics, actually, Lily corrected him, also standing. But yeah, Amir, that was incredible. As students began to file out, many of them stopped to say something to Amir, a word of congratulation, a question about how he learned to do math like that, a simple wow. Priya Patel even asked if he'd be willing to help her study for the upcoming test. By the time the classroom had emptied, leaving only Amir and Mr. Peterson, the boy was in a state of shock. This wasn't how he had expected the day to go. This wasn't how he had expected any day to go, ever. How do you feel? Mr. Peterson asked gently. Amir considered the question carefully. How did he feel? Exposed, certainly, vulnerable, but also recognized. Seen for who he truly was, maybe for the first time in his life outside his home. I feel okay, he said, surprised to find that it was true. Better than okay, actually, Mr. Peterson smiled. That knowing smile that now made sense to Amir. The teacher had planned this, had deliberately created a situation where Amir's mathematical abilities would be revealed. Why? Amir asked simply. Because talent like yours shouldn't be hidden, Mr. Peterson replied. It should be celebrated, nurtured, shared. He paused, looking at Amir thoughtfully. Did you know there's a regional mathematics competition next month? I think you should consider entering. A week ago, even a day ago, Amir would have refused immediately. The thought of participating in a competition, of deliberately putting himself and his abilities on display, would have been unthinkable. But now, standing in the empty classroom with the solution to an advanced differential equation, written in his handwriting on the board behind him, with the memory of his classmates' genuine admiration still fresh in his mind, the idea didn't seem so terrifying. I'll think about it, he said. As he walked out of the school building a few minutes later, the late afternoon sun warm on his face, Amir felt as if he was walking into a new world. A world where he didn't have to hide who he was, where his love of mathematics wasn't something to be ashamed of but something to celebrate. For the first time in his life, Amir Khan was exactly who he was meant to be. The chalk made a small clicking sound as Amir placed it back on Mr. Peterson's desk. The classroom remained utterly silent, 24 pairs of eyes fixed on him in various states of disbelief. Amir kept his gaze down, suddenly aware of the chalk dust on his fingers, the small smudge on his sleeve, the weight of attention pressing down on him. Mr. Peterson cleared his throat, breaking the spell. Well, he said, his voice carrying a mix of pride and wonder, I think we've all witnessed something remarkable today. Amir risked a glance up. Mr. Peterson was looking not at him but at the board, at the elegant solution Amir had just written out. The teacher's expression was difficult to read. Surprise, certainly, but also something deeper, more contemplative. Sir, Lily Chen said, her hand half raised. Was this a test? Did you know Amir could solve this? Mr. Peterson adjusted his glasses, taking a moment before answering. I suspected Amir had exceptional mathematical abilities, he said carefully. But I didn't know for certain he could solve this particular problem. He turned to Amir with a small smile. You've exceeded even my high expectations. But that's college-level math, Tyler Rodriguez said from the front row, twisting around to look at Amir with new eyes. How did you learn that stuff? All eyes returned to Amir, who felt his cheeks burning. Speaking in front of the class had never been his strong suit, and now everyone was waiting for him to explain something he'd never shared with anyone at school. I just read a lot, he managed to say, his voice barely audible. Math books, I mean. My uncle gives them to me. Your uncle must be some kind of genius, Priya Patel said, sounding impressed. Amir nodded slightly. He teaches math at Columbia University. This revelation sent a fresh wave of murmurs through the classroom. Mr. Peterson raised his hands, gently quieting the students. I think there's something important we should discuss here, he said, leaning against his desk and surveying the class. I put that equation on the board for a reason today. Not because I expected anyone to solve it. In fact, I was fairly certain no one would. The students exchanged confused glances. Even Amir looked up, curious now. That equation, Mr. Peterson continued, pointing to the board, is from the American Mathematical Olympiad from 2 years ago. It's designed to challenge the very best high school mathematicians in the country, students who are already taking college-level courses. He paused, letting that sink in. I showed it to you not to make you feel inadequate, but to give you a glimpse of where mathematics can take you. To show you that the subject goes far beyond the textbook problems we work on in class. Mr. Peterson's gaze swept across the room, making eye contact with each student. Every one of you has potential. Different kinds of potential, different strengths and passions. Amir's happens to be mathematics. Yours might be art or music or writing or sports, or something you haven't even discovered yet. The class was hanging on his every word now, even the students who normally dozed through math lessons. The point is, Mr. Peterson said, his voice growing more intense, don't limit yourselves. Don't ever think I can't do that or, that's too hard for me. You don't know what you're capable of until you try. He turned to Amir, who was still standing awkwardly at the front of the class. Amir didn't know he could solve this problem until he tried. And look what happened. The bell rang then, startling everyone. Friday afternoon was over, the weekend beckoning, but no one moved to leave. A rare occurrence in middle school. All right, Mr. Peterson said with a smile. I won't keep you from your weekend plans, but I hope you'll all think about what happened here today. And maybe, just maybe, challenge yourselves a little more next week. As the students began to pack up, the classroom buzzed with excited conversation. Amir made his way back to his desk, feeling oddly disconnected from his body, as if he was floating slightly above the ground. Lily Chen was waiting for him, her expression a mixture of awe and indignation. You've been sitting next to me all year, she said as he reached his desk. All those times I was struggling with homework, and you could do this? She gestured toward the board. Amir winced, feeling a pang of guilt. I'm sorry, he said softly. I didn't want anyone to know, but why? Lily asked, genuinely puzzled. If I could do math like that, I'd want everyone to know. Before Amir could formulate a response, they were interrupted by a small crowd gathering around his desk. Tyler, Priya, and half a dozen other classmates were looking at him with new interest, firing questions at him. Have you always been good at math? Can you solve any equation? Could you help me with my homework sometime? Do you like other subjects too, or just math? The questions came too fast, overlapping each other. Amir felt his anxiety rising, his chest tightening with the familiar panic of too much attention. He glanced desperately toward Mr. Peterson, who seemed to understand immediately. All right, everyone, the teacher called out. Give Amir some space. There will be plenty of time to talk on Monday. The crowd reluctantly dispersed, students filing out of the classroom with backward glances at Amir. Lily lingered a moment longer, giving him a small smile before she too left. Soon, only Amir and Mr. Peterson remained in the classroom. Amir busied himself with packing his backpack, trying to process what had just happened. His carefully constructed facade had crumbled completely. Everyone knew now. There was no going back to being invisible. Are you okay? Mr. Peterson asked, coming to stand by Amir's desk. Amir nodded, not trusting himself to speak just yet. I know that was a lot, the teacher said gently, having the spotlight on you like that. It's not what you're used to. Amir looked up at him, a question in his eyes. Mr. Peterson sighed, pulling up a chair to sit opposite Amir. I should explain why I did this, he said. It wasn't to put you on the spot or make you uncomfortable. You planned it, Amir said, not accusingly, just stating a fact. The teacher nodded. I did. I spoke with your parents last week. They told me how long you've been hiding your abilities, How difficult it's been for you to feel different." Amir felt a flicker of betrayal. His parents had never mentioned this conversation. "They're worried about you," Mr. Peterson continued. "So am I, hiding who you are. It takes a toll, Amir. It's exhausting, always wearing a mask." Would they stare at him? Whisper about him? Would some resent him for hiding his abilities? Or worse, would they expect him to be some kind of genius in every subject? Amir took a deep breath as he approached his locker. To his surprise, school felt normal. Students rushed past in the hallway, focused on their own concerns. A few people nodded at him or said hello, more than usual, but not overwhelmingly so. No one pointed or stared. In his first few classes, teachers treated him exactly as they always had. If they had heard about what happened in Mr. Peterson's class, and Amir suspected they had, they didn't mention it or single him out. By lunchtime, Amir was beginning to relax. Maybe this wouldn't be so bad after all. He headed to his usual spot, a corner table where he typically sat alone with his book, only to find Lily Chen already there. "I saved you a seat," she said, gesturing to the chair across from her. "I thought you might want company today." Amir hesitated briefly, then sat down. "Thanks," he said, unpacking his lunch. "I watched that documentary I sent you," Lily continued, as if they had been friends for years. "It's amazing what some kids can do with math, but none of them solved an IMO problem at 12. Amir felt his face grow warm. It wasn't exactly an IMO problem, he began, but Lily waved him off. "Close enough. Mr. Peterson told us it was from the qualifying round, which is still incredible." Before Amir could respond, Tyler and a couple of his friends approached the table. "Mind if we join you?" Tyler asked, already pulling out a chair. Amir blinked in surprise. Tyler Rodriguez, the most popular boy in their grade, wanted to sit with him. "Sure," he managed to say. As Tyler and his friends settled in, Amir waited for the inevitable questions about math, for the requests for homework help. But instead, the conversation turned to normal 7th grade topics: the upcoming school dance, a new video game, complaints about the cafeteria food. Occasionally, someone would ask Amir a question: what he thought about the game, whether he was going to the dance, including him naturally in the conversation. It was as if they had decided that yes, he was a math prodigy, but he was also just a regular kid like them. By the time math class rolled around at the end of the day, Amir was feeling something he had rarely experienced at school: belonging. He walked into Mr. Peterson's classroom with a confidence that would have been unimaginable a week earlier. Mr. Peterson greeted him with a small nod and a knowing smile. "I got your message," he said quietly as Amir passed his desk. "We'll talk after class about the competition." The lesson that day was on solving systems of linear equations, elementary stuff for Amir, but he paid attention anyway, appreciating how clearly Mr. Peterson explained the concepts for the benefit of the whole class. When a particularly tricky example came up, Mr. Peterson worked through it step by step on the board. Then he turned to the class and asked, "Does anyone see a different approach we could take here?" In the past, Amir would have kept his head down, even though he immediately saw at least 2 alternative methods. But today, almost without thinking, he raised his hand. "Amir," Mr. Peterson called on him, looking pleased. Amir stood up, his voice steady as he explained a more elegant approach using matrices. As he spoke, he noticed his classmates listening attentively, some taking notes, others nodding in understanding. There was no mockery, no eye-rolling, just genuine interest. After class, Mr. Peterson showed him the registration form for the regional mathematics competition. "It's in 3 weeks," he said. "I'd like to work with you after school twice a week to prepare, if that's okay with your parents." Amir nodded, excitement building within him. "I'd like that. There's something else," Mr. Peterson added, his expression turning serious. "The principal has been talking with your parents and me. We all agree that your mathematical abilities are well beyond what our curriculum can offer you." Amir felt a flutter of anxiety. What did that mean? Were they going to move him to a different class? Send him to a different school? "We'd like to develop an individualized education plan for you," Mr. Peterson continued. "You'd still take regular classes with your peers, but for math you'd work on an advanced curriculum, possibly even taking online courses through the local university." Relief washed over Amir. He could stay with his friends. Yes, he could call them friends now, while still being challenged mathematically. It sounded perfect. How does that sound to you? Mr. Peterson asked. Good, Amir said, a smile spreading across his face. Really good. The next 3 weeks passed in a whirlwind of activity. Twice a week, Amir stayed after school to work with Mr. Peterson, tackling competition-level math problems. The teacher pushed him harder than anyone ever had before, challenging him to not just find solutions, but to explore multiple approaches, to look for the most elegant methods, to explain his reasoning clearly. In competition, Mr. Peterson explained, it's not just about getting the right answer. It's about showing your work, demonstrating your understanding of the underlying principles. On other days, Amir found himself helping classmates who were struggling with regular math homework. What surprised him most was how much he enjoyed teaching. How satisfying it was to see understanding dawn on someone's face when he explained a concept in a way that made sense to them. Tyler, despite his reputation as a jock, turned out to be a dedicated student when given the right support. You explain things better than the textbook, he told Amir one day after mastering a particularly difficult problem. You should be a teacher someday. Lily, already strong in math herself, became Amir's friendly rival, challenging him with problems she found online. I'm going to beat you at the math competition next year, she declared with a grin. I'm starting my training now. Priya convinced Amir to join the math club, where he found a small but passionate group of students who shared his interest. Unlike his solitary mathematical explorations at home, the club offered collaboration, discussion, different perspectives. It was a new way of experiencing mathematics, and Amir found he loved it. At home, his parents watched his transformation with joy and pride. You seem happier, his mother observed one evening as they prepared dinner together. Amir considered this. Was he happier? Yes, he realized he was. There was still anxiety sometimes, still moments when the attention felt overwhelming. But the constant pressure of hiding, of pretending to be less than he was, that was gone. In its place was a growing confidence, a sense of possibility. I am happier, he said simply. The day of the regional mathematics competition arrived bright and clear. Amir woke early, his stomach fluttering with nerves. This would be his first time competing formally, his first time putting his abilities to the test against other mathematically gifted students. Remember, his father said as they drove to the community college where the competition was being held, the goal isn't to win. It's to learn, to challenge yourself. Amir nodded, though a small part of him very much wanted to win. The competition was held in a large auditorium, with over 100 students from middle and high schools across the region. Amir, as one of the youngest competitors, felt intimidated by the older students, many of whom seemed confident and experienced. Mr. Peterson, who had come to support him, must have noticed his anxiety. Take a deep breath, he advised. Focus on the problems, not the other competitors. You've prepared well for this. The competition consisted of a written exam, with 10 increasingly difficult problems to be solved in 2 hours. As Amir took his seat and waited for the signal to begin, he felt his heartbeat quicken. Then the proctor announced, "You may begin." And Amir opened his exam booklet. The first few problems were straightforward, similar to ones he had practiced with Mr. Peterson. Amir worked through them methodically, checking his answers twice. The middle problems were more challenging, requiring creative approaches and careful reasoning. But it was the last 2 problems that truly tested him, pushing the boundaries of what he had learned. One in particular, a complex problem involving number theory, had him stumped for nearly 20 minutes. He tried various approaches, hit dead ends, started over. Just when he was about to skip it and move on, a flash of insight hit him. The solution unfolded in his mind with that familiar sense of mathematical beauty, of pieces clicking perfectly into place. By the time the proctor called, "Pencils down," Amir had attempted all 10 problems and was confident in at least 8 of his solutions. The 2 hardest ones? Those were less certain. How do you think you did? Mr. Peterson asked as Amir emerged from the auditorium. I'm not sure, Amir admitted. The last 2 were really tough. While they waited for the exams to be graded, they walked around the college campus. Mr. Peterson pointed out the mathematics building, telling Amir about the research being done there, the possibilities that awaited him if he continued on this path. For the first time, Amir allowed himself to imagine a future in mathematics, not just as a subject he loved in private, but as a potential career, a way of life. He could be a professor like Uncle Fareed, or work in research or apply mathematics to real-world problems in science or engineering. The possibilities seemed endless.